Good morning. 4 minutes after 10 is the time. It's a funny one, isn't it? What's the weirdest thing about growing up, do you think? It's probably realising that there's no sort of sea change, is there? You don't sort of wake up one morning and feel like a grown-up. You never really feel any different from the way that you've always felt. And as you realise that you're never going to be fundamentally different as a consequence of age or maturity, you sort of realise that nobody else is either. In a sense, there are no grown-ups. It certainly feels like that at the moment in the context of British politics. This bizarre circular firing squad continues at a time when even a cursory glance at what is likely to happen to energy bills in the coming months would... how many times do we start the show thinking in normal times? Would this have happened in normal? I don't know anymore. That's how sort of hypnotised I am by events. I was about to say, would at any other point in British history be the only story in town? I don't get it. I'm going to be honest with you from the start. I'm not stupid. I'm not the cleverest person you'll ever meet, but I'm certainly not the dumbest. I could never be Secretary of State for Media, Culture and Sport, for example, but I kind of feel embarrassed sometimes by my failure to understand things. And then I realise that perhaps nobody else understands it either. And then I begin to think, stage 3 of this process of self-examination, I begin to think about the possible simplicity of answers to questions. Everywhere you look now in our economy, not in the whole world, but in the bits of it we're most familiar with, everywhere you look, Aditya Chakraborty's written a great piece in The Guardian about this. It just boils down to the fact that everywhere you look, almost everything is driven by the attempt to make a few quid for investors. Even care homes, children's homes, high street chemists, everything, everywhere you look. It's about trying to slice as much money off transactions as possible in order to enrich people whose role in the entire process consists solely of having money in the game. And that is so simply true that I do wonder quite why it is that so many of us end up thinking that criticising that sort of model is dangerous or politically toxic. The profits of these energy companies are unbelievable, right? And you don't buy your gas or your electricity direct from Centrica or direct from Shell. You buy it from retailers. They own some retailers. It's not a direct journey, but there is absolutely a case for wondering whether we've all gone mad when you look at the crisis of cost and the scale of profit. And I mean, you can tell, don't you? I don't get it. 7 minutes after 10 is the time. And the point I'm making about grown-ups, which you could be forgiven for wondering about, is I wonder whether anybody else, apart from Martin Lewis and a couple of other people, I don't know whether anybody else really gets it either. You look at what other countries are doing with energy costs. You look at what price caps have done in other countries and countries perhaps where some of these companies are nationalised rather than privatised. And you sort of think, well, it doesn't have to be this way. That's the point, isn't it? You can't, if you're anything like me, and I think on a morning like this you are, regardless of all the stuff we might disagree with each other about, I can't imagine anybody's looking at this, even if you're making money out of it, even if you've got loads of shares in Shell and Centrica and you're laughing all the way to the bank, you're still going to have to probably spend most of your profits, if you're a modest investor, on your energy bill. So all you're doing is moving the money around your bank account. So like leaving aside some sort of Dr. Evil style plutocrat sitting on an enormous mountain of money and wishing misery and pain on the rest of us, nobody can look at this and think to themselves that this is how it has to be. I worry increasingly, and I don't know whether this is Brexit related or not, I do worry increasingly that we're becoming a more insular population. We seem to be, unless something goes wrong somewhere else, and some corners of the media encourage a form of schadenfreude. You know, they want us to take pleasure in other countries doing badly, particularly if they're European Union countries. Apart from that sort of fetishized schadenfreude, we don't really know where we sit in comparisons. We had a prime minister, we still do actually, technically speaking, although he seems to be somewhat AWOL, even more AWOL than he was before he resigned, which is an astonishing achievement really for Boris Johnson, given that he was skipping Cobra meetings like it was going out of fashion before he even resigned as prime minister or leader of the Conservative Party. But you sort of look at the build-up and wonder why we're not more informed about what's happening in places like France or places like Germany and some countries maybe in an even deeper hole than we're in. But it surely doesn't have to be like this. And I think that's going to be the conversation that we have this morning. I want you to tell me whether or not things could be different. And that obviously credits you with a degree of understanding that I myself lack. Now, many mornings when I say I don't know the answer to a question, I'm expecting millions of people to have various answers to the question. I'm going to be a bit strict today, all right? The bit that we've got the bit I am struggling with is the subtext, the political subtext, that this is how it has to be. That is the only reason I can come up with for Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak and all the rest of them being apparently so untroubled by that. It has to be like... Am I being very naive when I say that almost everybody would be looking at this thinking, this just can't be right, this just can't go on? Does it have to be like this? So there's two questions here. Why is it like this? I'll have a crack at explaining that shortly. And how could it be different? So that's like the macro of the story. That's the meta. That's the big overview. That's the important stuff that I think we owe it to each other to have a slightly better understanding of. 03456060973. And your answer doesn't have to be technical, of course. It could be that we, as a population, are educated wrongly. You know, you don't study stuff like this at school. You don't have a particularly strong grasp of the relationship between energy and economy. All of these things are complicated, perhaps. Maybe the reason that the energy companies get away with these epic profits is simply because we're a little bit ignorant of how things could be different. I don't know. That's point one, right? So question number one is explain to me why ordinary families in the United Kingdom are going to see their energy bills go bonkers. Let me talk you through the numbers. The bills are forecast to rise from £1,971, these would be averages, to £3,420 a year when the price goes up next time. And then in January, they go up again, and it'll be about 3,850, which means the average customer is facing a £500 bill in January alone. Martin Lewis, who, if you listen to this programme on anything like a regular basis, you'll know is one of the tiny constituency of people that we consider to be beyond reproach. He has warned that people are panicking about how to pay their bills. The direct debits are going to go up in August before the leadership contest is concluded, and the leaders have got little or nothing to say about any of this. Martin's cri de coeur yesterday went like this: the problem is we have this zombie government that can't make any big decisions. Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss, Boris Johnson, if you're listening, go and sit in a room together, please. Make a collective decision now of what help you can give and make an announcement. We cannot wait until September the 5th. There needs to be action now. You're all in the same party. You should be able to work out some unifying policy, sit in a bloody room, decide what you're going to do together, take a little bit of collective action. And that leads me to the second part of the story this morning, the second bit of this. And I'm going to say something a little bit weird now. I'm increasingly conscious when I present this programme of, I'm going to use the P word, all right? It gets knocked about a bit at the moment and it gets a bit misused, but I'm increasingly conscious of my privilege. And, when you look at what members of the media earn, it's not like it used to be. There are plenty of people in this industry, some of whom may even be close to household names, who don't earn sums of money that put the national average in the shade. It is no longer a particularly lucrative profession, journalism. But there are, as in any other line of work, there are gradations and there are stages and levels. And I am increasingly conscious of being at a level that insulates me almost entirely from the sort of price increase that I've just described to you. So I'm not thick, again, and I'm not devoid of empathy. So I can imagine that if there's not a lot left at the end of the month at the moment and your annual energy bill is just shy of £2,000, then when it is closer to £4,000, that's a gap you don't know how you're going to fill. But I think everybody needs to know what that is like. And so that's going to be the second part of the phone-in in the first hour of the programme. When Martin Lewis says people are panicking, is he talking about you? 0345 6060 973. So quite a bit of heavy lifting for you this morning, which I make no apology for. I need to know, and I think you need to know, why is this happening? Why are we looking at an economic landscape that sees our personal energy bills going through the roof while the profits posted by the big energy companies are absolutely immense? 0345 6060 973. Question number 2, does it have to be like this? 0345 6060 973. And then the simpler question, but the one that I wish I didn't have to ask, is, are you panicking? When you hear those numbers, what sort of decisions are you going to have to make? There was a vox pop with an elderly chap on the telly yesterday. And he said in quite a matter-of-fact way, he just said, well, we'll probably have to eat less. And I don't know why. That one really got me. That one really hit me. I've got no idea why. Sometimes the news washes over you. Sometimes vox pops are an absolute waste of everybody's time. And sometimes they can cut straight to the heart of an issue in a way that, worthy and po-faced analysis never can. That's why I much prefer a phone-in show to any other form of media. But 2022, massive economy. Yeah, people up living in, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but I use it as a figure of speech. People living in castles and all of that. Money sloshing around London, still on levels that you wouldn't believe. The richest people in the world doubled their fortunes in many cases during the course of the pandemic. A bloke trying to become Prime Minister whose father-in-law is one of the richest men on the planet. You've got a Chancellor of the Exchequer who's got millions and millions and millions of pounds. And we're living in a country where people are thinking that they're going to have to eat less in order to pay their energy bills. I don't get that. I'm really sorry. I don't get it. But I want to know what you're going to do. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. It's 10:17. 18 minutes after 10 is the time. People are beginning to panic. People are panicking, says Martin Lewis, the money-saving expert. Are you one of them? And can we together come to a better understanding of what is causing this panic? Let's start in Huddersfield. Steve is there. Steve, no pressure. What would you like to say?
Morning, James. I try and it's quite complicated, but I try and explain how the price cap's set and how the company are making the huge profits that they are.
Yeah. Qualifications?
I used to manage a £22 million energy contract for a local authority.
Cool, that'll do.
So obviously the people that produce the gas and the oil want to have a certain demand in the future. So what they do is they sell that demand on. So at the moment, companies like Shell, which is my provider, are buying energy for future years ahead based on their models of what demand they're going to have from their customers. So, for instance, the UK government has just sold all of its renewable energy to the suppliers for 2026 for £37 per megawatt hour, which relates to about 3p a kilowatt hour.
Right.
So the companies have already bought their energy for 2026, and then they top that up as it goes on. So they'll have a risk model which shows how much they need to buy towards their fulfilment for that particular month. and they'll try and buy everything that they need to supply for that month.
Okay.
At the end of the month, anything that they haven't fulfilled in future years, they buy on what they call on-the-day prices.
Yeah.
So they're more expensive because it's like buying something today.
Okay.
Buying something sort of 3 years ago, which would have been cheaper.
I get that. So it's just like buying in advance because
That's right.
the people selling it want the money. Because
That's right.
they can use the money or invest the money or get interest on the money or whatever they want to do with the money. So they'll give you a little bit of a break for giving it to them sooner. If you give it to them later, you're going to have to pay more for the same product.
Exactly.
Yeah, that works.
So then when they set the price cap in this country,
yes,
it's based on the average of the last 6 months on the day market, which is the most expensive price.
And it's set by Ofgem. It's set by the energy company regulators. So it's a little bit pointless. All it does is stop scalping on a day-to-day basis. It just puts... No, go on then.
The way the profits are made, obviously, the on the day price is the most expensive because either gas or oil producers have to boost their production or something like that. So the energy cap is based on today's price. But what they've actually done, so today's price might be 280 quid a megawatt because it's difficult to get hold of at the moment. But they've already bought 90% of their energy at about 30 or 40 quid a megawatt hour, so 3 or 4p a kilowatt hour. So everybody's getting charged what they're paying today for it, not what they've already paid for it. So this is how they're making huge amounts of money.
And so that will be true. That will be true everywhere, will it? To varying degrees.
Well, the reason that all the smaller companies got knocked out when the prices went up is they had a different model. So the large companies who are big and established, they've already fulfilled what they need for 2025, up to about 95%. So they're only going to buy 5% on the day. But they're charging you that. You've
done a bang-up job. You've done a really good job. I was worried at the first couple of hurdles. I was thinking that just on my part, that I was being a bit slow on the uptake and that I wasn't going to fully understand where you were going. But I've got it now. It's quite straightforward, and that renders it inevitable. It means that there's nothing you could do to stem the flow of money from punter to company, is there?
This is just the way that it works in the UK.
Yes.
So it works different in different companies.
And if a government owns the means of production, if a government owns a power company, then obviously they're going to be in a much better position than a country in which the government owns nothing. All because the money's going straight into the private pockets as opposed to the public pockets.
But the ironic thing is the UK's renewable energy. So there's about 40-odd gigawatts that we produce in a year, and that's eventually going to go up to about 60 gigawatts by 2030.
Yeah.
They've just sold that at 3p a kilowatt hour. But when we get to 2026, Shell, who are my company, are going to be selling that back to me at 28p a kilowatt hour. So that's how the math... So the only way to fix it is to look at the price cap. And at the moment, the price cap is based on the most expensive price. It's not based on the price people have paid.
What would be a better way of setting the price cap?
Well, there's plenty of data around, and what they need to do is look at the average price over the last 3 years.
So it's been turned into a market, really, without any real... And there's no real need to have a market when it could just be set by supply and demand rather than the speculation that you've described to us.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah. But as I say, the UK government know that it works because they've just sold it for 3p a kilowatt hour.
Did they have any choice but to do it that?
Well, it goes to the market, so whatever the best bidder is.
But they couldn't they couldn't sell it later or anything like that?
Well, then they'd have to restrict their production.
And now European countries will be on other issues. There's going to be an auction. We're going to be outbidding each other on things like liquid natural gas.
Well, that's another story.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just looking at it. So what does the light at the end of the tunnel look like then?
Well, the light at the end of the tunnel is someone to sort of get their head around how the price cap works.
And that is
and make that fairer.
That's the long-term answer. The short-term answer for the people, the panicking people that Martin described yesterday. What would that look like? It's simply some form of windfall tax, isn't it? It is simply saying to a company that's just posted £1.3 billion worth of profits, we'll be having some of that back if you want to carry on doing business in this country. No,
but at the end of the day, I mean that the company should sign up for that, because all people are going to do, they'll get a windfall tax payment, I don't know, £1,000.
Yeah.
What they're going to do? They're going to give it
their energy
back
bill.
to the energy company. Yeah, exactly. So it's self-perpetuating, but the energy companies are still making.
You've just done one of those things there. That always makes me think of mirrors in lifts, mirrors in elevators, where it goes on forever and ever and ever and ever and ever.
Oh yeah.
Because
yeah.
what you've just described there, you do a windfall tax on an energy company, we all get a payout, but we use it to pay our energy bills.
So it goes back to the company.
Oh, there goes my reflection of my reflection of my reflection of my... So what a windfall tax would do is merely extend the amount of time it will take for the energy companies to have the money.
Exactly.
We'll just play pass the parcel with it for a bit longer before it ends up where it was always going to end up. And by playing pass the parcel with it for a bit longer, we perhaps move towards a point where the cap comes down because variables have improved, whether those variables are wars in Ukraine or other issues. That the idea that a windfall tax just provides a stay of execution in the hope that the overall price will have come down by the time the money's made its way back to the energy companies that it's always going to end up with anyway.
Exactly, but the only
have you thought of throwing your hat into the Conservative leadership ring?
I would describe myself as a floating voter.
Yeah, fair enough.
I'm an environmental socialist, and there's I certainly wouldn't be voting Tory at all. Never have done, never would do.
No, but you've managed to explain it extremely well, and I'm really grateful to you.
Well, just to explain, talking about the liquefied gas, in Northern Europe there's 7 refineries. So sort of Northern Europe, there's 7 refineries. 3 of those are in the UK.
Right.
So the cheapest price to buy gas at the moment is the UK.
But we're selling but
we're pumping across Europe as quickly as we can.
Yes, that's
but
right.
At the same time, gas is very, very cheap for major companies to buy. We can't buy ourselves. You know, it'd be really nice if we could
just go out and buy gas.
Go out and buy gas directly from the supplier, but we have to buy it from an intermediary. And the intermediary are the people that are making the millions of pounds of money. And
that's where the slightly simplistic model that I described at the top of the hour begins to take more shape, I think. This entire system now being built upon the idea of maximising the number of slices that people can take in the passage of the swapping of money for goods or services, making it so layered. And even think of Deliveroo or something like that. Just looking at ways of taking a piece of the action. It is incredible. Steve, you're an absolute star. A lot of love for you coming in as well. An awful lot of people as grateful as I am for the clarity that you've brought to bear upon this question. Feel free to add to Steve's analysis. I hope you're not going to challenge it. You're obviously welcome to, but just as I finally begin to feel the sort of floor beneath my feet firm up a little bit, thanks to Steve's descriptions, I'd hate for you to come along and tug the rug. But the other question, of course, and a really important one, I'm getting quite a few answers via text and tweet, is the question of panicking. I mean, what are you going to do? How do we... And then I think we know each other well enough now for this question. That point I made earlier about an awful lot of the people providing the coverage to you will have no idea of what it's actually like. You know, anyone reading the news or presenting a programme on LBC or anywhere else is going to be considerably better off than the average consumer of energy. So how do we overcome that obstacle, that media privilege? How do we make how do I do a better job of properly reporting and recognising the reality of these wage increases on normal households? And the answer is you're going to have to tell me, and you're going to have to explain it, and I'm going to have to listen. It's 10:30. Dominic Ellis is here now with your headlines. It is 33 minutes after 10, and it is fair to say that most of us struggle to understand how energy companies can be posting such enormous profits while energy bills for households are rocketing at such an exponential rate. If you have been listening for the last 20 minutes, you will now have, I hope, a much better understanding of how that happens. It goes further as well with the difference between the regulated domestic energy market and the unregulated commercial markets, which is where the major profits are made. But it doesn't undermine the sense or the feeling that when people are thinking of going a bit hungry in order to pay their energy bills, the people walking away with £1.3 billion worth of profits could be reasonably required to see that number reduced by legislation, by law. This phrase windfall tax, I don't know that it's one of those words that is being sort of engineered, socially engineered in the way that they've engineered other words. Talked yesterday about red tape and the way it's been turned into a negative, where it may include legislation that, for example, prevents your boss from making you wear substandard personal protective equipment. I mean, that's red tape. That's like fire alarms. Having to have fire alarms in buildings, that's red tape. So I don't know whether windfall tax has got a sort of nuance to it. I don't think it has. I think maybe it's got a slight sense of, well, that's not fair because windfalls are luck. You shouldn't be taxed on luck. But it's not luck, is it? The system is designed to deliver these profits. And people seeing their personal bills go up from just shy of £2,000 to just shy of £4,000 in the next 6 months. I mean, that's scary. I think it's scary. 10:35 is the time. Bernard is in Edgware. Bernard, what made you pick up the phone?
Yeah, good morning, James.
Hello, mate.
I've got an existing gas and electric contract which is coming to an end in September.
Right.
And I'm currently paying £200 a month, and I've got about 600 and something other pounds in credit, because I've obviously used less than the contractual amount. I knew that it was coming to an end, and was anticipating that watching what's going on, that the costs are likely to go up, and I was guessing maybe between £400 and £500 a month they would charge for a similar sort of contract.
Okay.
Yesterday, I had the email from them, basically saying your contract's coming to an end, and you've got 3 options.
Go on.
For a new 2-year fixed contract, £670 a month. For a 1-year fixed contract, I'm sorry, I haven't got the exact figure with me, it's about £650 a month. Yeah. Or I could do what they called a rolling programme, which presumably means that as costs go up every month, and that was at £330 a month, so presumably if costs go up, they're just going to rocket anyway. Yeah. But I'm sort of been in business all my life. I'm now semi-retired, and I'm not rich by any means, but sort of fairly comfortable. But the thought of having to stump up £670 a month actually fills me with dread now. I'm getting scared.
That's seven or eight grand, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Like, for the first time in my life, I really feel scared. Oh, man. And what with all the other costs that are going up, and my income sort of dropping quite dramatically once I fully retire. Yes. It's a real concern now.
What do you feel about or what is your response to the suggestion that, because it sounds a bit lazy to say politicians must do more, it's a little bit something must be done, but if this isn't the sort of scenario that they intervene in, I don't know what the point of them is. How do you respond to Martin Lewis's insistence that the government should be sitting in a room until they've come up with some way of addressing your fears?
Well, I think the question of the taxing on their excess profits, both from the suppliers and from the intermediary, I think is a given. Maybe even some tax recessions, whether they reduce the VAT on fuel or something. But to do what they've done in France, France protected their people by saying it's limited to, 4%?
Yeah, but they own EDF, don't they?
Yeah, but we're paying for that.
Yeah, but that's the problem with privatisation.
For all the French people.
That's the problem with privatisation versus nationalisation, or at least state-owned institutions. I don't know that there's much we can do about that in the immediate to short term. That's the way it goes. £9.5 billion, Shell, has chalked up in profits this year. £9.5 billion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting in the middle. I'm not rich, not poor, but scared.
Yes,
now.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that you're scared, and I don't like these conversations, Bernard, as I'm sure you understand, because I don't like not being able to say anything that can reassure you or give you cause not to be scared. But because this is not an opinion that you've described, this is counting. It's numbers, it's sums that have made you frightened. It's looking at what's coming in and looking at what's likely to be going out and spotting an anomaly. And I don't know what the point of politicians is if it's not to intervene at precisely moments like this. Thank you, Bernard, and good luck. There's a brief moment of politicking, if you like. It's nuts, right? You got this leadership, this ludicrous, God almighty, it feels like it's already been going on for years and it's nowhere near over. There's 11 more hustings. I don't know whether one of my colleagues was trolling me this morning, and that's not true. I couldn't bring myself to check in case it was. Please, stop now. Look, we all know who's going to win. Why do we have to carry on with this nonsense? But you've got this ludicrous leadership contest continuing with about 11 people eligible to vote in it. And then you've got the Prime Minister. It feels like an inadequate title for Boris Johnson, doesn't it? What is the point of them all? When people like a lifetime working, professional, moderately successful, professional's got nothing to do with it, but by his own definition, sort of comfortable, now frightened of what energy bills are going to do to his economic situation. What are we doing? Watching some ludicrous game of table tennis between two supremely unfit politicians while the country is just slip-sliding away? I don't get it. I haven't got it for a long time. But at least we've got each other. Stuart's in Honiton. Stuart, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James,
Hello,
and thanks for the fantastic and vital work you do. And the end of my point will link lovely to what you've just said. But essentially, this is the worst example of the most obscene corporate greed that's destroying the planet coming to fruition. Yeah. With your permission, I'd like to mention a documentary on a mainstream streaming platform, if I may.
Yeah, quickly though.
Big Oil versus the World. It's on BBC iPlayer.
No, it is astonishing, isn't it?
It blows your mind as to how, for the last 40 years, the most powerful companies in the world have put all their profits into undermining arguments against global warming. The really scary part, and as soon as Liz Truss came into the leadership race, I could not understand for the life of me why she was being put forward as the candidate. And suddenly, light bulb moment last night, watching the hustings. She worked 4 years for Shell. And even last night, she's defending fracking, which, when you watch that documentary, is proven to be an unsafe source. Companies are still, ExxonMobil, the world's largest oil company, are ploughing money into carbon capture.
And there's a naivety, isn't there, to the average member of the public? And I include myself in that category. I don't know whether you include yourself, but it's only through doing this job that I've become aware of these vile lobbying outfits that call themselves think tanks and the way they've inveigled their way into every conversation about these things without telling us who funds them. But, you turn the BBC on and there's someone sitting there from some dodgy think tank, some Herbert, giving it large about how we don't need this and we don't need that. And they are literally just shilling for the big oil companies that you describe and deliberately and knowingly creating the situations in which we find ourselves today. That's what I mean by naivety, thinking that, it can't be that blatant, it can't be that cynical, it can't be that gross. And the documentary you refer to sort of blows the lid off that naivety, doesn't it?
100%. And I think that the solution is Norway approving it. we can have all our energy from renewable sources that won't poison the planet. And how do we do a better job? We talk about it. We watch these documentaries and educate ourselves through valuable, reliable news sources. Because if we don't, we are getting to a tipping point.
I mean, you can't have a viable, reliable news source if it's got representatives of these think tanks on it, giving the impression that there's two sides to the story. You know, back to the old model I used to use of Nigello Lorsini being invited onto Newsnight to argue with Galileo Galilei about heliocentrism. I mean, it is bonkers, and it is where we are. Are you sure about Norway? I'm not ashamed of my ignorance on some issues, so I'm happy to admit it. Norway's really leading the way on this? Did you say?
My understanding is they've
got shed loads of gas, though, haven't they, in Norway?
Well, they did. When they had the opportunity, like we did, to invest in renewable years ago, they did, and now my understanding is they have 99% of their energy coming from renewables. If it was just corporate greed for profit, then, you could think, well, okay, they're making money.
Yeah.
And nothing against making profit.
No, but it's the planet. It's the price we pay.
Yes.
It's the price they pay as well. That's where the naivety comes from, because you think, well, hang on a minute. If it's that simple, why are these people doing stuff that's going to screw up their own planet? And then I think it was Kemi Badenoch who said at some point during those debates, she said something along the, well, we're not going to be here, are we?
Yeah. We're going to have our bills quadrupled when we don't need to, whilst destroying the planet. And we as a people need to stand up and say, no, we're not going to accept this. There are solutions there, but we need to talk about it more. So thank you for talking about it, because it's so relevant.
And you wonder why so much of the media is desperate for you to be talking about kneeling footballers and statues rather than stuff like this. It's fairly straightforward, isn't it, given the likelihood of someone who owns a newspaper also having a rather large presence in the shareholdings of these energy companies. It's coming up to 11:15. A quick digression, because Stuart mentioned Norway. I finally watched Aha, the movie, yesterday. Oh, my days, my heart is broken. I am one of the many, many enlightened people who consider Aha to be one of the finest bands of the last 50 years, but I had no idea how fractious relations were between the band members. I've never watched a musical documentary that packed such an emotional punch as that. If you know the boys, if you know Mags, Morton and Paul, I really think that they should all do Full Disclosure together, and it'll be like a therapy session, and I'll be able to fix the entire band. I only mention that because it paints pictures of Norway that I hadn't seen before, and describes Norway as having been sort of Norway's isolation and sense of backwardsness being intrinsic to the rise of Aha and their need to get out of Norway and into London. I wonder how many people feel seen now in that little aside about Aha. Out of my 1.4 million listeners, I'm guessing probably about 50. But I like to cater to every taste during the 3 hours that we spend together every morning. It is 10:48 and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We kind of know where it's happening or why it's happening. We kind of know that there is a natural injustice to the size of profits being posted by companies like Shell and Centrica, while personal energy bills are reaching unprecedented and, for millions of families, I think, unmanageable heights. And today we're just talking together in the hope of bringing some light into the conversation, not light as in levity, but light as in illumination. And I do think the more I think about it and the more we talk about it, the more baffled I am by the political landscape in Britain at the moment. I think, because obviously I do this for a living, and I do honestly think I have to be so careful, because it sounds like I'm criticising other people in the profession or even colleagues, and I'm really not. But I think the scale of how bad things are, the scale of Boris Johnson's awfulness, and the fact that his successor, his likely successor, is complicit. She's continuity Johnson, Liz Truss. She's never really criticised him or acknowledged how awful he is. I just think until this spell is broken, then nothing gets done or nothing gets fixed. Rishi Sunak talking to Nick Ferrari last night about bringing back grammar schools. It's as if they're getting their ideas from 1975. It is just bizarre. Now, it may be because the Conservative membership, i.e. the only people in the country who have a say in who the next Prime Minister is, are still living in 1975. And an awful lot of them are. But for the rest of us, The idea that they're talking about grammar schools. I mean, to be honest with you, if I was allowed anywhere near these politicians, I would only be talking to them about energy costs and climate change now. I can't do it every day on the radio because you would turn off. Every single day you turned on LBC, you turned on the biggest show on the station and we were talking about climate change every day, I wouldn't be the biggest show on the station by the end of next week. I just can't do it. Human beings are fickle. I am fickle. I enjoy talking about weird stuff. What did we do yesterday? Did we do something funny yesterday? I certainly intended to do something funny yesterday. Oh, no, we ran out of time. But anyway, I was going to talk about scruffiness, wasn't I? I was going to talk about scruffy coppers. I was really looking forward to talking about scruffy coppers. It's a bit like being in the pub or in a social situation. Imagine if I turned up at your house for dinner every night and started talking about climate change. You'd be building a O'Brien-sized cat flap before you could say, oh, for goodness sake, wind your neck in, will you? You're so much fun when you talk about scruffy coppers. So there are huge problems here. Huge problems for all of us. But you can't talk about it every day. 0345 606 0973 is the number you need if you want to talk about it today. Gary's in Newport. Gary, what made you pick up the phone?
Morning, James.
Hi.
And, well, first of all, I completely share your bewilderment with the current political landscape. It's farcical.
The bit. Sorry, I interrupted myself because I was about to say I look at the media coverage, and it is carrying on as normal, isn't it? And this is what I mean about. I don't want to sound like I'm criticising anybody. When you sort of see people thinking perhaps or saying, "Oh, Liz Truss is actually looking quite good now in this leadership campaign," and you're just sort of thinking,
Really?
yeah. I can see why you're saying that. But you're talking as if this is normal, as if these are normal times. And they can't be normal times. Leaving aside Brexit and the self-imposed economic sanctions and the problems with getting workers and all the rest of it, just focusing entirely on energy, you've got the party of government having some sort of bizarre circular firing squad, a prime minister who is just going on away days and crossing things off his bucket list. Oh, I'd like to fly a plane. Oh, I think I'll do a bungee jump tomorrow. I'm going to eat my dinner on a roller coaster next week while someone films it. And then you've got these juxtapositions, these profits being posted while our bills are rocketing. It's absolutely bonkers. Anyway, why did you ring in? Sorry, Gary.
That's all right, mate. I've listened quite a bit, so I'm used to it now.
Good man.
So our position. It's not from my personal position that I'm phoning up about. I help run a local football club in the South Wales Valleys. We're approaching 100 years old in 4 years' time. We've got 20 plus teams from junior girls right the way through to veterans, about 450, 500 playing members, and we've got a not-for-profit clubhouse.
Yes.
So our electricity bill a year ago was £300 a month. We've been contacted in the last 2 days. It's going to be £900. Now, as you can imagine, we're not a hugely profitable business. We break even. We do okay, but that kind of bill actually threatens the existence of the clubhouse.
Oh, boy.
Now, we will get through it. The reason we'll get through it is because it's too bloody important. Excuse me, I shouldn't have said that.
No, that's fine.
It's too important that we do get through it, because if we don't get through it, these kids, whilst they'll still play football, they don't have that base. They don't have that.
Oh, it's a beating heart of a community, something like that. I really, that's something I do understand. I do get that, and it's an interesting perspective to take, because you're not speaking about personal situations. You're reminding us of the ripple effect, the ramifications of these increases right across the board. It's not just about eating and heating and that kind of thing. It's about keeping amenities alive, keeping amenities afloat.
It is, and the crazy thing is, if the worst did happen, which, like I said, as long as I draw breath, we will not let that happen.
Have a whip round, can't you? But you can't have a whip round for everybody on the street.
No, but we'll do it, because we'll think differently. Even this morning, I've been to see our local MP to see if we could become a Warmbank in the winter and get some, work with the Trussell Trust.
Just pause right there, because a lot of people listening to this won't know what a Warmbank is. I read about them yesterday, and I couldn't quite believe my eyes. Tell everyone what a Warmbank is, Gary.
It's in effect the legacy of a Conservative government, James. It is where people will go this winter to stay warm because they cannot afford to heat their houses. We have food banks. We have now going to have Warmbanks in what we are told is one of the best functioning economies in the world. If that is not gaslighting on an epic scale, I ask you what is.
Well,
I ask you what is.
I don't know if you read Boris Johnson's account of what a brilliant job he's done as Prime Minister, but I like the idea of Warmbanks being his legacy. Warmbanks in the United Kingdom.
Isn't it vile?
A building where the community has raised money to turn up the heating so that people who are cold at home can just come and sit there for a couple of hours and not be cold. I don't know how widespread, but I don't know if we'd done this 20 years ago and we'd been talking about food banks, maybe we'd have had a similarly visceral response. Gary, maybe we'd have been similarly disgusted about the prospect of food banks being in every town, and now we've got more of them and we've got branches of McDonald's.
It's what is deemed as hyper-normalisation, isn't it? It's the normalisation of, well, I don't even know anymore.
Well, you nailed it when you first came on. It's this idea of we must maximise profits, and everything else, everyone else can go whistle. I'll need to look up on that. Good luck, Gary, with that. And as you say, as long as you can draw breath, these communities. My late godfather, my uncle Martin, was the mainstay of Romilly Cricket Club, just outside Stockport. And until I went to his funeral, I hadn't realised what an astonishing contribution he'd made to hundreds of lives, and B, the role that these sports clubs play. The number of lads that came up to me at the wake just to say, your godfather he changed my life. He made such an impact on me. And that's what these clubs do. It's not just about playing sport. It's about having somewhere to go, someone to talk to, mentors, father figures even. And I wasn't expecting that to pop up in a conversation about energy prices, but that's why we do what we do every day, isn't it? 10:57 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Mark's in Budapest. Mark, we don't have long. What did you want to say?
I'm ready to surprise you a little bit on this call, I think. Ignore Orban and ignore all the other stuff. What we have here is none of our energy companies are publicly owned. Everything was privatised 30 years ago after communism because nobody had any money, basically, and they had to renew all this infrastructure and everything.
Yes.
Since November last year, we've had price controls, which is as left-wing as you get.
Yes, it is.
And on fuel...
he's just had one major advisor resign because he's turned into a Nazi, but on price controls, he's left-wing.
Let's talk about economics. Let's talk about economics for a second.
On
price controls, we've been paying £1.05p for fuel since last November, and it's remained static. He's also got price controls on gas and price controls on...
Where does the money... So who is being... I don't want to say punished.
The equivalent of Shell and BP, because Shell and BP are two things. They're selling the fuel, they're refining the fuel, but also they're exploring the fuel. They make profits everywhere.
So they simply say, so the Hungarian government, and you can't leave Orban to one side. I mean, no. You are describing a man whose own allies now see as a Nazi, but the government essentially says to these companies, if you want to carry on doing business here, you cannot sell it for above this price.
Absolutely.
What happens if they walk away, though? Because, I mean...
they won't walk away because it's a publicly traded company.
And they're still making some money. They're not being forced to run at a loss. I would like to know a little bit more about that. I mean, as a counterpoint, if you like, to this story about Warmbanks. Thank you, Mark, which... inevitably Martin Lewis has actually already spotted. I can't believe I'm writing this, but I wonder if this winter we'll need warm banks, the equivalent of food banks, where people who can't afford heating are invited to spend their days at no cost with heating. UK councils are in talks to set up warm banks. This is from Thursday the 14th of July, so just a couple of weeks ago. According to the National Energy Action, the NEA, 11,400 winter deaths are already caused by cold weather, and councils are now in talks. So I don't know. Maybe it'll never happen. I don't want to sound like I'm scaremongering, but the fact that the phrase even exists in modern Britain... It is 3 minutes after 11, and it is a thing, it would seem. Quite a few people getting in touch to tell me that they are aware of Warmbanks being on the horizon. Helen tells me I've contacted my local councillor about this. They're setting up a task group as we speak that we're going to be involved in. They are happening, James. And Marvin Rees, the Mayor of Bristol, in response to Martin Lewis's tweet that I read to you just before the news, has said we are doing this in Bristol. They are... likely to be ready in September and open in October. Just pause, actually. Let's all just flipping stop for a minute, okay? I am describing to you now, live on the radio, something that had beeped on my radar, but only very quietly. I am now telling you that the Mayor of Bristol, a big British city, has been actively organising a city-wide network of warm places, or welcoming places, as he calls them, ready to open in October. And these will simply be spaces in buildings that are warm, to which people who are cold can go. Do you see what I mean when I talk about how bizarre I find it? And it's only because I was off for a fortnight. I know that sounds odd, but I'm pretty sure that's the reason. I go away for a fortnight and I come back and it's like the cogs don't bite. The teeth of the cogs don't bite like they were biting before I went away. Look, we're all cog. I'm a cog in the machine. I'm a cog in the media machine, right? And all the other cogs are turning, and that means I turn as well. You go away for a fortnight, and it's like you just extract yourself, and your cogs aren't biting, and you're looking at the machine rather than being a cog in it. Does this work? I've tried so hard to explain this to you this week. You must think I'm obsessive about the impact that holidays have on me. But does that work? So I'm looking at the machine without being a cog in it. And obviously, as the weeks pass, the cog makes its way back into the machine, and I again slightly lose that perspective. It's the one I normally describe as having your face so close to the screen that you can only see the pixels. You can't actually see the picture. But this isn't right, is it? This is actually insane. This is the United Kingdom in 2022, with a Prime Minister who claims that he has done a brilliant job, and a leadership campaign underway to replace him from people who were on his left and right hand shoulders as he presided over this decline. We've had 12 years of Conservative rule in this country, and councils are either opening or exploring the possibility of opening warm places for people to sit in because they can't afford to heat their homes. I hope I can keep this cog out for a little bit longer, because it's important to notice this stuff, right? Isn't it? Listen, they may not happen. It may not occur. It may only be 2 or 3 councils, and they're all, do-gooding lefties, and it'll turn out it was all. But I speak to people who are cold when winter bites. I speak to people who are sitting on their sofa wearing their outdoor. You remember the teacher's wife who talked about indoor coats and outdoor coats? It's a natural response, or an evolution at least, of those circumstances, to have local politicians considering the possibility of opening publicly funded warm places. Publicly funded warm places where cold people can go because they can't afford to heat their homes. And Rishi Sunak wants to bring back grammar schools, while Liz Truss claims to be the blood sister of Margaret Thatcher. What are we doing? What are we doing? That's it, isn't it? It's all about the cogs. It's all about and those companies that made all that money from all those contracts that were handed out to cronies and to mates while Boris Johnson was doing his best. Where's that gone? Where's the track and trace money gone? Where is it all? Warm place. That has absolutely finished me. Warm places. Sheesh. 8 minutes after 11 is the time. The phones are ringing. I was going to move on to something else, but I don't think I will. I'll just find out why the phones are ringing. Loz is in Plymouth. Loz, what can you tell me?
Hi, good morning, James. Pleasure to talk to you. I just heard the chat prior to the news, the first time I'd ever heard of Warmbanks. I'm a food bank volunteer, James.
Right.
And I see up close and personal the devastation that this Tory government have caused and done to people's lives. But Warmbanks? Yeah. I mean, this is on a scale that you don't even see in third world countries. I
listen to insert a tiny bit of humour in these bleak times. They're usually quite hot.
Well,
sorry.
Yeah, okay. I'll give you that one, James.
Cheers.
Yeah. They are, to be fair. But I think the general point is we are now seeing levels of Britain, of parts of Britain, that are on a par with some of these countries in the third world.
Is it necessary? So, look, the Mayor of Bristol, he has said it sounds almost like wartime. We'll be working with community organisations and partners around the city to set up warm places that people can go to if they need to, come autumn, when people need to turn their heating on again. What you can do as a food bank volunteer is give people listening to this, particularly perhaps people who are sceptical or cynical but decent. You know, we can't reach the indecent people.
No.
But scepticism and cynicism can be hand in hand with decency to help them understand how bad it is for some of the people that you see when you're volunteering.
I see desperation, James, every day, and it's devastating and it's upsetting. I serve my country in conflict, and I'm seeing poverty and destitution on a level in my own country that I didn't see when I was serving my nation. It's that bad. And what gets me, James, you've got two potential Tory leaders who are arguing about grammar schools and tax cuts, which will benefit the wealthy, and yet they're looking the other way when they see people. I don't know. Because
the people struggling the most, whether they're in work or not, and a hell of a lot of them are in work, for people who like to reach for that particular button, that they won't be paying much tax or any tax because they're earning so little. So tax cuts aren't going to help them much or at all.
So, but what gets me, James, and it's been a cycle throughout the last 50 years, I would say. They'll reinvent themselves as a new party. They'll forget the past 12 years. They'll reinvent themselves. The right-wing press will back them up to the hilt. And here we go again. The cycle continues, and people will fall for it, or certainly a large section of the English population will fall for it.
Of course they will. And
possibly vote for them again.
And I don't know who will be scapegoated. It's the trades unions this week. They've stepped up to the plate vacated by the European Union or by single mothers or unemployed people or Muslims. It was for a long time, and people will be encouraged to hurl their abuse at others. Listen, we just hope it doesn't happen, don't we? I mean, that's what will 30p Lee say when they open the Warmbanks? He'll say, "Don't you realise you can heat a house for a week with a single briquette of charcoal?"
Absolutely, James. There is one crumb of comfort in all this. With the people I speak to, and I'm very politically engaged, so I do speak to lots and lots of people. Yes. I'm now sensing that amongst the Tory voting fraternity of my friendship, shall I say, they have now seen the light. Lots of them have seen the light. And that's a small crumb of comfort. A lot of them have seen the light now, and I'm quietly confident that we can remove them at the next election. Let's just hope we can, James.
You won't get much challenge from me on that hope and that aspiration, although, of course, an awful lot of people who describe themselves as left-wing are still busy scrapping with each other or trying to attack so-called centrists rather than focusing upon the people who are in charge. Loz, take care, mate. I can tell some of this weighs heavily on you. It weighs heavily upon us all, but we are we are stronger united. Earlier this year, down in St Albans tells me, St Albans Libraries tweeted out an invitation to those who couldn't afford to heat their homes to come and sit in the library. You're lucky it's still open. To stay warm, they even suggested bringing sandwiches for lunch too. I also know of others who sit in the local Wetherspoons in order to stay warm and have a refill coffee for 99p because it works out cheaper than staying at home and using their own kettle and heating. It seems like we are in a race to the bottom at the moment. Start of 2022, Bungay in Norfolk, their community support group, Suffolk it is, isn't it, Bungay, not Norfolk, sorry, provided warm rooms for people to use over the winter. This was reported in the Eastern Daily Press. It was set up for those struggling to afford energy prices and to help combat loneliness in the community. And it's happening in Germany as well. The Berlin Senate is planning heat halls for those living in Berlin who may be faced with gas shortages, the multimedia news site RB24 has reported. That's a slightly different way. It's a very different problem, but the solution is the same. One German city, Hanover, has become the first in Europe to switch off hot water and central heating in public buildings after Vladimir Putin turned off the gas supply. So I just mentioned that for context. This is a weird one, isn't it? This is one of those days where we've stumbled into something that we weren't expecting to stumble into. It happens occasionally. We haven't discovered this. Martin Lewis had already mentioned it, but the Mayor of Bristol had already actioned it. Some newspapers had already reported it. It's not like the time. I think my favourite, for want of a better word, in recent years was when we were talking about track and trace, and we took a call from someone quite randomly who just told us that they were on the payroll. They were on the track and trace payroll, and they hadn't done anything for a fortnight. Literally nothing. All they just moved their mouse every now and then so that whatever technology was tracking their activity would know that they were actually sitting at their desk. And we thought, that can't be right. And then we thought, well, it must be a one-off. And then by the end of the week, every single corner of the British media was talking about it. It happened here, like the little crack in the dam happened live on this programme. We're not doing that here, but I have a similar sense of shock, actually, and disbelief. And I hope that the disbelief turns out to be well placed. But right now, I'm not so sure. It's coming up to 11:15. We seem to be talking about this now, so I'm certainly not going to intervene or change horses. I do want to talk about something else. So at the moment, something cheerful at 12 o'clock, right? Maybe sooner. And I don't know if this counts as cheerful, because it certainly isn't going to be cheerful for one of them, but it's either going to be the Wagatha Christie story. I haven't yet got a question to ask you. I think we might just go like this. We might just go, we'd just do that, shall we? Just go, get the report in, the verdict drops, hopefully at 12 noon. If it's on time, we'll just go, and then have a chat about it as if we were in the same bus queue or sitting around the same table. So that Wagatha Christie business, eh? Give me a call and tell me what you think. Yeah? Can we just do, does that work on the radio, that noise that I'm making, or does it sound like I've got a squeaky wheel on my chair? You know, like a little shrug, and you go, oh, does that better if I do, oh. So that Wagatha Christie bit, Rebecca Vardy and Colin Rooney, eh? What about that? 03456060973. Oh, my days. I don't know. You only know the era that you're living in, don't you? You never really have full grasp. However committed a historian you may be, you can never actually wake up in the 19th century or even in the 1970s. But and you know, time passes. This too will pass. You get comfort from knowing that in the great sweep of human history, all the awful things and all the amazing things have happened hundreds and hundreds of times before. But I can't quite believe that I'm sitting here in 2022 talking about the possibility of councils and charities opening up warm spaces come the winter for people to sit in because they can't afford to heat their homes. Unbelievable. And I guess I'm just asking you what you make of it all. I suppose we need to address the question, and I wish we didn't, of whether or not you're almost glad to hear this news because you will go to one. 03456060973. It's 11:18. I don't know if we'll talk about this for a whole hour, but if you want to, then we will. It's pretty straightforward. Stuart's in Lancaster. Stuart, what would you like to say?
How are you doing, James? How was your holiday? Good?
Well, yeah, it feels like a long time ago today, actually, Stuart. I'm a bit gobsmacked by this line of conversation.
It is. It's just so ironic. I was in the kitchen. I was just making some breakfast, breakfast, brunch, if you will.
Look at you, gentlemen of leisure.
I work from home, so I've got the kids off school at the moment. But my ears pricked up when I heard the Warmbank thing, and it just resonated with me because my wife, she worked for a local council, and she came home the other day and said, "Have you heard what we're going to be doing come winter?" Because we were talking about, topic of discussion is obviously heating, et cetera, all the time.
Yes.
She says we're going to be opening up all the council buildings locally. So she works in she'll sort of hot desk in various sort of council buildings around the local area.
Right.
And they're opening the council buildings up for people to come into. And my initial thought was, well, great. People can come in and obviously sort of get warm and things like that.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. That wasn't my initial thought. That was my second thought. But it is actually, I mean, in the context of someone who's cold, this is good news. But.
Exactly. But, and then you've got the caveats, which are, okay, so my next question was, who's staffing it? She says, us. As in, my wife's expected to then basically sort of, be the additional staff on hand as well. So I just was absolutely gobsmacked that the local council are not even taking an advantage to even get some jobs in place.
Well, they'd have to pay people with money they haven't got, wouldn't they? I mean,
it's absolutely insane.
Right, okay, devil's advocate, is it? I mean, have we where are we starting our memory bank from? 1970s, when we had power cuts that caused by industrial action rather than by...
Well, I was born in 78, and I grew up in a house when I was a kid, no central heating.
Yeah.
I remember having a little electric heater. When I was a kid, my mum and dad gave me an electric heater for the bedroom. I didn't run it all the time, but
it'd be expensive though. I mean, you may not have had central heating, but you were still paying. Your mum and dad were still paying energy bills, and the more you used your little heater, the more they paid every month.
It is. I mean, I'm fully aware of obviously that we are, we're 40 years down the line from when I was a kid, and the top and bottom of it is that we've got used to a luxury lifestyle, etc. But this is such a step backwards that people are looking at paying more for their energy bills than they would for. It's just absolutely insane.
£500 a month for an average family. That's more than they're going to spend on food, isn't it? In a lot of cases,
it's absolutely ridiculous. I run my own business, and I basically pay myself the bare minimum out of my business.
Sure.
In order to obviously sort of
keep it in there.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, people, you had the guy on before who said he was genuinely scared.
Yeah.
And it's just completely unreasonable. How can somebody be paying £600 a month, which you probably wouldn't spend £600 a month on anything else?
No.
It's like, I mean, I used to think that Sky Television was like expensive if you had the full Sky package.
Yeah. How much is that these days? How much is the full Sky package these days?
I think it's probably about, last time I had it was about 120 quid a month or something like that. But that's nothing compared to what these people are asking.
No,
I honestly believe, James, it must be something to do with the CERN reactor. Something's gone on with that CERN reactor, and we've ended up in another universe somewhere where everything's upside down.
And you do, and I know I go on about it, but I think probably even the biggest sceptic is beginning to understand why. You open up your newspapers, and biggest story in town today for the Daily Mail is the NHS shutting its gender identity unit for children, which is, I'm told, good news. I mean, it is something that needed to be done, but the idea that that's the most important story in town, in a country that is now talking with a straight face about Warmbanks. I actually thank you, Stuart. So get back to work now. Enjoy your brunch. You're using me for a little unscheduled break. I honestly, I feel so exploited. I feel so objectified. I don't know what to say to you. I never have that. I'll tell you what we've done over the years. I'm conscious again of my P word, my privilege. We've stumbled across examples of unfairness and suffering that have staggered us. But there's a sense now, isn't there, of hypernormalisation, the earlier caller called it. There's just a sense now of there being so much of it around the place, so much that is shocking and wrong, and so many people unaware of it or unmoved by it, that you've got this almost like two countries. That's why Stuart's talking about a parallel reality. There's a country in which Boris Johnson has done a brilliant job, and Liz Truss will promise to keep his legacy alive. And then there's a country in which councils are talking about opening warm banks in the winter. Food banks are suffering at the moment, by the way. I've got a couple of friends who volunteer in food banks, and the number of donations has diminished hugely because, of course, people haven't got a few quid spare. And it is usually, it's like the old woman in the Bible, isn't it? It's usually people who are closer to poverty that have more sympathy for people who are in it. So the food banks are having all sorts of problems, and now we're looking at Warmbanks. When I say I don't know what to say to you, I don't mean that I'm speechless with shock. I just mean I don't know what to say to prompt interesting responses. I've been lucky so far. I haven't actually asked a proper question, and you've rung me with really powerful contributions. But what do you say? What does a phone-in host say about what do you think about Warmbanks? Are you for or against them? What the hell? Warmbanks? Dave's in Liverpool. Dave, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello,
First,
Dave.
I'd like to say thank God you're back.
Well, I've been back a week, man. You know, it's
I know,
but no,
but
you're very kind. It's the first time we've spoken.
Painful without you.
Don't be kind. Be kind.
Yeah. Look, James, what I really want to say is that I'm old enough to remember the days when we had nationalised industries.
Yeah. Don't go all rose-tinted on me, Dave, because they were, in many cases, they were an absolute dog's dinner.
Well, yes, but let's just move that to one side for now, because nothing could be worse than the situation we're in. I mean, it's absolutely desperate, and I just think the only solution is that we renationalise our vital industries. And I really want to hear the Labour Party shouting out that the people who nationalised the industries were the Tories. And
Privatised.
Yes, privatised, yeah. They are responsible for the position we're in, you know. I just don't hear the Labour voice loud enough.
I agree with you.
You know.
I agree with you. I think that the desire to see a change in power after 12 years of this, and of course the continuing internecine or attempts at internecine warfare in the Labour Party notwithstanding, you've got to be able to call for the leadership to do more, even as you are grateful that it's them in the position as opposed to anybody else. But I mean, just spend a moment with me, if you would, looking at this notion of gaslighting. I don't know if you heard my tortured analogy about cogs and wheels.
I did.
Because we're all too busy living, is what I mean, in a way, to really notice this. And I perhaps have a tendency to catastrophize, maybe. I don't know. Are we sure that this is as shocking and as remarkable as we think it is? Or is there a possibility that we're just, and the people who are ringing in, and there are quite a lot of them, I've got to be honest, but are we all just a little bit, I don't know what, the naive, or no, that's not quite the, do you know what I mean? I mean, would it be possible to hear this news, to rationalise it, and to carry on unshocked?
No, I mean, the thing is, it's a crisis, and I fear we're going to have some civil disorder.
What do you do if you're cold? Man alive. Sorry, go on.
They can't. The thing is, if we're in a situation where we have millions of people who cannot pay their bills, they cannot possibly prosecute millions of people. You know, so there will be maybe some unity if it comes to that in mass non-payment. And that's what it'll come to. I mean, my bill this time last year was £100.
Yeah.
It's now, in the last week, gone up to £200 a month.
Right.
And that's like
without any heating.
We've had no heating on for months.
Of course.
And it's a tip of the iceberg.
What are people going to do? And the parallel universe argument is double, isn't it? Because on the one hand, this is the lived reality of everybody, whether it's an increase you can accommodate comfortably or not. And everyone will have different degrees of comfort, and some people won't be able to accommodate it at all. And yet there's a sense in the media, certainly, that things are just ticking along. Certainly in the right-wing media, things are actually going well. They keep telling us. Things are going well. I can't do another, can I? Can't do another coma hour. Imagine I've just woken up from a coma. Can someone explain to me how we have a right-wing media and a government claiming that they've all been doing a bang-up job? Not even really now holding Boris Johnson to account. Even the ones that actually found the cojones to resign are sort of backtracking a little bit because this crazy membership still like him. I don't know. How many people sitting in warm rooms do you think will be Boris Johnson fans? Some will. It's not his fault. I blame that Jeremy Corbyn. I blame Vladimir Putin. I don't know. I blame Gary Lineker. Certainly not. Nothing's ever his fault. It's crazy, right? Phone lines are open. They're very busy, but I don't know. I won't say I don't know why. I do know why. It might be that not everybody ringing in is able to help us have this conversation. If you want to come at it from the other angle, I'd really welcome your call. I'm not in the mood for a scrap on this one, but if you just want to say, get over yourselves, it's not that bad. I'll do my level best to stay friendly, because I almost want to agree with you. I would almost quite like to think, come on, get over yourselves, it's not that bad, just a few Warmbanks around the place. What's wrong with that in 21st century Britain? Public buildings dedicated to keeping cold people warm. You know, those are the sunlit uplands that we were promised, aren't they? That's your 350 million quid a week on the side of a bus to help create a country where we have to open up public buildings with heating on to accommodate people who can't afford to turn it on at home. Wow. 0345 6060 973. Dominic Ellis is here now with the headlines. 33 minutes after 11. Indulge me and my tortured analogies one more time, if you would. Do you remember the scenes in Italy at the beginning of the COVID crisis? And we sat here marvelling at them, reeling at them. Couldn't quite believe our eyes. Feels like a long time ago now to me. It may not to you. I suppose it depends on what experiences you've had over the last few years. But the hospitals that were completely overrun, bodies that were untended, the warning bells that were ringing at the highest volume. Of course you remember that. And our government did nothing. Our government seemed to think that it wouldn't affect us. They pressed ahead with the Cheltenham Festival and they allowed that football game. It was at Atletico Madrid, I think, who were playing in Liverpool. You're looking, on the one hand, you'd be looking at the pictures in Italy and thinking, what the fig? And then on the other hand, you'd be looking at the Cheltenham races and a massive football stadium full of punters, many of whom had come from continental Europe, had come from southern Europe, had come from Spain. And you sort of had a sense of wonder. It is as if they do this thing here at work. I'm going to be with you imminently, Simon. Sorry, I've just got a bit of a weird one brewing, I can tell. They do this thing here. We have a fire alarm. And what they announce, they're doing the fire alarm, ignore this alarm. Is that what do they say? What are the words they say? Do they say ignore this alarm? I'm not giving away trade secrets, am I, or anything like that? Do they say ignore this alarm? It happens every Friday. It drives me absolutely potty. It's so loud. Obviously, it has to be. But they say there will now be a fire alarm practice. Ignore this alarm. I sometimes think Boris Johnson always has that echoing in the back of his mind. Ignore this alarm. Ignore this alarm. This is a drill. Ignore this alarm. So now I'm hearing, we've got 2 months on this. 2 months. Energy bills. And what are they doing? They're talking about bloody grammar schools. I will bring back grammar schools. No, I will bring back. I'm like Margaret Thatcher. No, I'm like Margaret Thatcher. 2 months. The alarm bells are ringing. And the other thing that springs to mind, apart from the LBC office fire alarm, is climate change. Because those alarm bells are ringing as well. But we don't know how long we've... Now, don't text me to tell me that we do know how long we've got. You can't make people feel the immediate threat. Okay? Not enough people feel it yet. But this is happening in your own house in 2 months' time. Every house in the country in 2 months' time. Again, to refer back to Martin Lewis, that the physical and mental toll upon our health alone is going to be immense. It's going to be huge. And the alarm bells are ringing. 2 months. You've got 2 months. We've even got the numbers in front of us. We know the sort of increases that we're going to be looking at. If you don't think British councils contemplating Warmbanks is one of the loudest alarm bells we've heard in our lives, then I've got a bridge I need to sell you. Seriously. This is bonkers. And the woman who's going to be the next Prime Minister, the last time she used the word disgrace was to describe cheese imports. Cheese imports. Sorry, Liz, what's a disgrace? We import 2/3 of our cheese. That is a disgrace. Pause. Wait for applause from the half-dead audience at the Conservative Party conference. Cheese imports are a disgrace. Warmbanks is a phrase that has never passed her lips, and she's going to be the next Prime Minister as the leader of a party that's been in power for 12 years. Oh, I'm glad my cogs aren't turning today. I really am, but I don't know. What do you do? 11:37 is the time. Here it is, just for clicks and giggles.
We import 2/3 of our cheese. That is a disgrace.
We live in a country where councils are contemplating community-funded warm spaces for voters to visit because they're freezing cold and can't afford to turn the heating on. And the woman who is going to be our next Prime Minister has generated support from a ludicrous electorate consisting entirely of Conservative Party members by telling massive lies about Brexit, enormous fibs about trade deals that she's signed, and pretending that the stuff we should really be concerned about is the amount of cheese that we import from France and Italy and other cheese-producing countries. That is a disgrace. And the British media, and I don't want this to sound like an insult or a criticism because I am part of it, and when my cog is in the machine, it just whizzes along with all the rest of the cogs. But when, for reasons that I don't fully understand, you manage to get your cog out of the machine for a while and you just have a look at it instead of being part of it, we're all behaving as if there's nothing incredible or remarkable or extraordinary unfolding. We've got a man in Downing Street who was having a knees up with a former KGB spy who's been sanctioned in Canada for being part still of Vladimir Putin's inner circle. He's in Downing Street, claiming that he is Russia's biggest enemy. Liz Truss is claiming that she's going to be public enemy number one in the Kremlin, and she said not a single word about the fact that her boss has been having a knees up with Alexander Lebedev in a Tuscan palazzo, despite the fact that his links with Vladimir Putin are so complete and so current that Canada have bloody sanctioned him. And we're all having a conversation about grammar schools. It's absolutely insane. What's the big problem facing the country today? Cheese imports.
Về đâu anh chẳng thuộc